Right. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm often told I speak rather fast, but after Pietro, I probably feel I'm speaking rather slowly, perhaps. Anyway, I'm very grateful to be here in Trieste in order to give this presentation. First of all, everything I say is Creative Commons license. You can download this and use it for whatever purposes, and you can get the slides as PowerPoint file or on SlideShare using the links at the bottom. Those links will be repeated later on. I've got this topic which has been given to me, politics meet citizens, a way forward in an unstable scenario. And I've got three main points which I'm going to raise in order to try to address that question which has been posed to me. The first point is that we are witnessing a challenge to organizational hierarchies in what we do in online politics. To most of you in this room, this sort of organizational structural change is quite normal. We're moving from traditional hierarchically structured organizations to network structured organizations. Unfortunately, that change has been proceeding at a much slower pace within the traditional political and governmental environment than it has in the tech environment. We're instead starting to build some sort of hybrid organizations where we're building on kind of peer networked organizations onto our traditional organizational structures. Or alternatively, it could look like that, where we're building a network of organizations which are applying pressure to a particular point within our political systems. So I'll come back to each of those diagrams as I go through the other main points that I'm going to raise. The next point is that the party is over and that there is an appeal of prefigurative action. I will explain what that means in a minute. But when I mean the party's over, I mean this sort of traditional political party engagement. And for me personally, this is very much at the core of the problems that we face in online politics and indeed our entire political engagement in European countries just at the moment. For my sins, I've been a member of this party, the Labour Party in the UK, for more than 10 years. It's something like a drug addiction. It's kind of like it hurts like hell, but I can't quite kick the habit. It's the most traditional organization you can possibly imagine. You join your local group, you might be elected to a local committee. If your local committee puts you forward, you get to the regional committee. The regional committee then might potentially select you as a parliamentary candidate and so on and so on. You go up through the most traditional hierarchical organization you can imagine. The difficulty is, and maybe this is something that is familiar to those of you who are here in the room, is when we cross the threshold over that threshold into a traditional political party organization, we become different people. In the sense that all of us here in this room, we can relate to each other as individual normal human beings. I have no more power than any of the rest of you. You can pose me questions, you can undermine me on Twitter and tell me that I'm talking rubbish, as I'm saying that here now. That's different when we cross the threshold into a traditional political party meeting because of the hierarchical power structures which still exist in those parties. The difficulty is that transparency of the operations of our political structures is not in and of itself adequate. It's worthwhile, it's useful, but we can only see the malevolence of our politicians rather than actually being able to be them. The UK has been rocked just these last days by yet another lobbying scandal involving one Conservative Party member of Parliament. We can see in to see that those problems are there, but we cannot, unless we play the hierarchical structural game, actually be those people. And people often come to me and say, and I've been working in online politics with British politicians for something like 7 or 8 years now, it's only a matter of time. Just wait for it. A new young generation of politicians will come along, they'll all understand everything, and it's all going to be okay. Now, out of my own personal experience, dealing also with young politicians, they have gone up through that hierarchical system themselves as well, and therefore they have no incentive when they get to the top to change the system that got themselves to the top. They might be compulsively Googling themselves and editing their own Wikipedia pages to make sure they present themselves well online, but that's kind of reputation protection online. It's not actually using the power of the net. So I don't think that generational change within traditional political parties is going to cut it. At this stage, I'd just like to bring in for me, one of the most interesting intellectuals doing some thinking about some of this sort of stuff, but not in terms of networks online, more in terms of party political structures. It's a British academic called Colin Crouch, who's coined the term post-democracy. By that he means that we have the formal structures of democracy that we once had, but those formal structures are becoming like a kind of a hollow shell. If you look at, for example, engagement in traditional political parties, in 23 of 27 EU countries, there have been declines in party political membership over the last decade. Only just over 4% of Europe's electorate is a member of a political party, and those trends are down across in 23 of the 27 European Union countries. So the idea from Colin Crouch is essentially to say that traditional party political mainstream is dying. It's not going to disappear. We're not going to cease to have elections, but nevertheless, the strength and the vibrancy is draining away from that system. So what do we do? Well, we can build networked organizations instead to try to assume political power. So you can build organizations like the Occupy movement or the Indignados in Spain. And this is where I come to that term that I mentioned, prefigurative action. By that I mean going into politics and behaving as normal human beings. By that I mean engaging honestly and straightforwardly with people, not thinking about the hierarchical structure first. So actually, the way you do politics is more important than the actual outcome that you get from it. And Europe's kind of cause célèbre, if you like, of that kind of way of doing things is, of course, the Pirate Party, and particularly the Pirate Party in Germany. But what we've seen with the experience of the Pirate Party in Germany is when the networked party comes up against the hierarchical structure of the mainstream media, you have a problem. By that I mean the mainstream media doesn't know what to do with the Pirate Party because it has no definable leaders. Those are the best known leaders of the Pirate Party in Germany. Can anyone even name who they are in this room? Anyone show me a show of hands if you know who they are? Can't see a single hand being shown there. They are, if you're interested. Katharina Nocken, who's the policy coordinator, and Bernd Schlermer, who's the chair of the party. But that's precisely the problem there, that a party political organization that has no leadership is one which struggles to engage with the remaining legacy role of the mainstream media in our political systems. Of course, if you're an extremist movement, you can do the same too. So while the Pirate Party might be, for those of us in this room, a positive example, the Magyar Garda and Jobbik, the far-right movement in Hungary, are the negative case in point of building party political organizations that way. And then there's, of course, this gentleman, those of you may love to hate who are in this room, and his British kind of equivalent, if you like, Nigel Farage of the UK Independence Party. I would say that they are not traditional network-based organizations, but they are political parties in the modern age that have realized that all of those levels of the hierarchy are an inefficient way of doing your organization. So they've kind of lopped off the bottom part. And nevertheless, however, and I think that's perhaps what explains perhaps the ongoing support of the UK Independence Party and of Grillo's movement, is the fact that actually the mainstream media knows how to deal with the UK Independence Party, or knows how to deal with Grillo much better than it would know how to deal with the German Pirate Party. So those are a few things to bear in mind. I do not see the prospect of the party political mainstream being able to rebuild and be able to regenerate. So movements such as Cinque Stelle or UK Independence Party or the Pirate Party are going to become the kind of norm. You're going to be able to have to put up and take down political parties in a much faster turnover than you have until now. So what do you do? Now, you can alternatively, and here we come to some of the things drawing in some of the theories from the United States, citizens can self-organize to try to deal with some of the deficiencies in the political system. And some of the ideas were best sketched out in the book Future Perfect by Stephen Johnson, where he was trying to say, okay, can we take some of that networking that we've done so well online and try to apply that to kind of offline problems, essentially, in which coined the term the peer progressive in order to describe that. The difficulty is, in Europe, we're kind of struggling to work out how to do that at the moment. So this is a very interesting developing online case just at the moment. It's about the decline of bee populations in Europe. Yeah, this may be one that you've encountered. that there is a particular type of chemical which has been used to treat seeds on farms called neonicotinoids, sorry. And what we've witnessed in that circumstance is an enormous online mobilization, mass online petitions to ban this particular chemical to be used in seeds. This has led to an EU-level ban on the use of this particular chemical in seeds so as to protect European bees. Big, strong online mobilization and a defined political outcome. But this was not essentially a proper network-based organization in order to do that. We had many networks which were essentially using their pressure to push the traditional basis of power in the traditional hierarchical organizations. And we've now witnessed plenty of other equivalents. You may have come across Hugh's Fish Fight, for example, a very successful online petition about reform of EU fisheries policy, which has actually delivered a good political result earlier this week. And also the only so far successful online petition at European level to gain 1 million signatures was the European Right to Water initiative, to not allow privatization or not enforce privatization of water facilities in Europe. And who were these great citizens who managed to actually deliver this result of 1 million citizens? It was actually the German Green Party. So what you're seeing is a movement in both ways. There you had what was supposed to be a tool which was supposed to be for grassroots participation, which was essentially used to a great extent by the traditional basis of power, the political parties, in order to achieve their success. Then moving on, the well-known cases are you can organize political protest, and what are the ethics of managing to do so? Obviously from Tahrir Square, that was generally welcomed in Europe, but then when only 6 months later a bunch of disaffected youths in London suburbs rioted, David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, took a very different approach to that question. That's, however, not stopped David Cameron and his government from trying to use these kind of networked solutions to political problems. This is one that also comes from the Stephen Johnson book. The UK government is currently going through a process of changing the way its school system is organised, and it is introducing what is known as free schools in the UK. That is basically allowing groups of parents or not-for-profit organisations or companies to put together proposals to run schools. It essentially says the state system is not adequately running schools. Can we use a network-based system in order to manage to deliver better school results? I think the equivalent in the United States is charter schools, and the free school system that the British government has adopted has come from Sweden. The difficulty here is we're only at the first stages at the moment of this development in European countries. What we don't know yet is if these free schools don't succeed and don't work out, what happens? You've only got one chance to school a child, and if it goes wrong, who's going to pick up the problem in such a circumstance? Sweden has gone a step further in all of this, where it's had both not-for-profit organisations and private firms that have been involved in running of hospitals. This is a very interesting case, the St. Göran's sjukhus, St. Göran's Hospital. This was a hospital that was threatened for closure due to budget reductions. A private company thought they could still run it and stepped in order to run it, but the hospital has then been criticised for a poor quality of care. Is it better to have that circumstance or to have a guaranteed state level of care? And where, and importantly, where should the line be drawn between what has to be the ongoing responsibility of the state and what can be done either by peer-based networks in a not-for-profit way or profit-making companies such as this that are running this hospital in Stockholm? One final book to cite, and then I'm almost at a close of my presentation. We need to work out, and this is from a United States professor, Michael Sandel, whose book, What Money Can't Buy, has tried to give some moral basis to this. Where are the limits of the state? What are the things that have to be provided by the state, as opposed to the things that could be provided by not-for-profits or provided by private firms? And then there are some things which Stephen Johnson in his book just essentially says are just too fiendishly complicated and require a law in order to manage to push for a solution. Could you manage to find a networked solution to dealing with the problems of climate change, for example? His conclusion is probably that you could not, and that you would still need traditional government action. And another one which is high up the political agenda in Europe just at the moment is what to do about the fact that companies such as Amazon and Google have very complicated tax arrangements and are avoiding paying corporation taxes in European countries. The only real solution to that one is to actually legislate in order to manage to force those companies to pay their taxes. At the moment, there's a lot of naming and shaming going on, but nevertheless, the companies realize, I think, that until the law changes, they'll manage to find a way around that public pressure. So just to conclude some of the thoughts from the presentation, what we're seeing as a result of kind of online thinking is a challenge to traditional organizational hierarchies. The party in traditional political party is over, and there's an appeal of prefigurative action, essentially people going into politics and behaving as if they're normal and straightforward human beings. And there's some opportunity for citizens to self-organize, but the process of managing to do that is going to be complicated, and in Europe at the moment, we're only at the very beginning of working out how that could potentially work. So, penultimate slide, all of the Creative Commons images which I've used in order to illustrate the presentation, and that is all, and there again, once more, are all of the links for if you wish to download the slides.